Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever, however you're listening to the podcast. We appreciate that you are. This is the Delaware High School Football Pod presented by Websites for Sports, and we're the only media outlet dedicated exclusively to high school football in the first state. The pod's available wherever you listen to your favorite pods. Also on YouTube for those who like to watch what you're listening to. Follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football and on Facebook at the DELHS Football Pod. Please recommend us to your friends, like us, share us, etc., etc. All right, this is the Class 1A. It's not a bracket reveal, but it's a bracket go over, for lack of a better term. We're going to run through the top of the bracket and then the bottom of the bracket. And that way you'll have our thoughts on what is going to be happening on Friday and Saturday in the first weekend of the playoffs. So, Marty, let's get right to it. We'll start with the number 1 seed, Tatnall. They come in with a 9-1 record. They're going to take on First State Military Academy, the 8 seed. They've got a 6-4 record. It's the first time they've ever been in the playoffs. So, first of all, congratulations to First State Military Academy. That game is going to be on Saturday at 1 o'clock. The last times these two teams met was back in 2019. So, nobody on either one of these teams cares about 2019, nor do the parents involved in it. Tatnall, their only loss was to Wilmington Friends back in week 1. They went on a 9-0 run, I should say. Since then, 3 of their wins were against tournament teams, including Glasgow, St. Elizabeth, and Charter of Wilmington. For First State Military Academy, they've got only 1 win against a tournament team, and that is Brandywine High School. If you're one of those common opponent type of guys, they both won against AI. They both played St. Andrews. Tatnall beat St. Andrews. First State Military Academy lost to St. Andrews. They both played Charter School of Wilmington. Tatnall beat Charter School of Wilmington. First State lost to Charter School of Wilmington, or lost to Tatnall. They both, and so you look at that, it's a 3-1 advantage to Tatnall in the common opponents type of thing, which you would expect because that's why Tatnall's the number 1 seed. And First State Military Academy is the number 8 seed. And so, Marty, this might not be a great game on paper, but we'll see what it looks like when they actually play on Saturday at 1 o'clock up at Tatnall.
Yep. Yeah, on paper, this is clearly the biggest mismatch of 1 versus 8 seeds. But FSMA, remember, it was just a few weeks ago. Brad Myers had them ranked number 1 for a couple of weeks. They went on that slide where they lost to Polytech and St. Andrews. Both those games were kind of ugly, actually. They got back on track. They did lose in their final game to Indian River. But, man, what a great season for these guys. You know, when they lost to Charter in week 2 after beating AI, I thought, it's cool. They got the win over AI. You know, they had a nice season with the 1 win. You know what I mean?
Right.
All of a sudden, they start beating some of these other teams they hadn't beat before. And I just think it's so great to see these first timers in the playoffs, them and Polytech, of course, who's also in D1. But as you said, yeah, they're 1-3 versus playoff teams. Junior quarterback Philip Price has really been the guy that gets things done there. 1,000 yards through the air, 20 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. Mark Lawrence, who had several phenomenal games for them during the season, was over 1,000+ yards and 11 touchdowns. They had that sort of inexplicable loss to St. Andrews that was really ugly, but you know, they're going to come to play. They're going to come to play, but I just think in this case, this is Tatnall just looks like in a amazing 1A, maybe one of the better 1A teams we've seen in terms of their relative competition, what they've done against them.
Right.
Tatnall leads the state, all 46 teams, in both scoring and scoring defense. They're winning their games by an average of 42-6. They've allowed 7 or more points only twice. They've scored 50 plus points 5 times. You mentioned they beat the 3 playoff teams, Glasgow, St. E, and Charter. They beat those teams by a combined score of 115-6. Excuse me. Some of their stuff is just ridiculous. Brendan Ireton sent me some of this information. 16 interceptions on the season, their defense, 11 fumble recoveries, 31 sacks. They scored 7 defensive touchdowns. They set a school record for points and points allowed, of course, being the fewest points allowed. It's just been a phenomenal season for them. And Jack Homer is the real big guy on defense for these guys. 75 tackles. These numbers are crazy. 32 tackles for loss, 15 sacks. Their offensive line, I wanted to highlight these guys because with, let's face it, Rashawn Lamons is the guy
Mhm.
in this offense that's just been phenomenal. I'll get to him in a second. But you can't do it without an offensive line. They've got Josh Booth, Destin Hoggard, Max Martier, Jake Glazer, Danny Henley, and tight end Jaden Miner. These guys are setting the table there. They're blowing people off the ball. They're allowing Lamont who, it's funny, at this level, he reminds me of a Will Knight type player where he'll get to the line and then stop and wait for the blocks to open up or the blocks to take hold and then cut through them and he's gone. He had one against St. E the other week that was just incredible where he got to the line, stopped, took a stutter step to the left, and he was gone. They're averaging 259 yards rushing a game. Uh, they had 8 running clocks, which is just
In
insane.
10 games.
In 10 games. I mean, this is nuts. Rashawn Lamons, we got to him. Quinn DeVere was their starting quarterback early on. He was hurt. He's a young kid. So they moved Lamons, who was the running back, to quarterback. All he did was complete 50% of his passes for 600 yards and 12 touchdowns and only 1 interception. By the way, he also ran for 1,300 yards on only 94 carries, 25 total touchdowns, 10 2-point conversions, 170 total points. And Micah Stamper is one of their guys. He plays like kind of a wing position on offense. 601 total yards, 12 total touchdowns, 80 total points. These guys are just absolutely top to bottom loaded. And for FSMA, I really feel like this is a stepping stone game for them for the program. I almost hate to say it, but don't be surprised to see this game be an absolute blowout and be a running clock in the second half. But you never know. Weather comes into play this time of year. There's different things, crazy things can happen. And again, who would have thought First State Military Academy that we're even talking about them in
Right.
mid-November is insane. So it's a credit to them and what they've been able to accomplish this season. So for those kids, man, I hope they go out and give Tatnall all they can handle. It'll only help Tatnall in the long run if Tatnall's able to get the win here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just great for the game. The First State Military was able to get in there and snag the 8th seed.
Yeah, I feel good for those kids, good for the coaches, good for the parents. As we said, Marty, this Class 3 system, what it should do is it should give every team a somewhat legitimate shot to make the playoffs.
Yep.
And we had a couple teams do it for the first time this year. First State Military Academy won.
And Jeff Braxton is one of those first-time coaches. I wanted to point that out too.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just done him and his staff have done a phenomenal job down there.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so Tatnall FSMA Saturday at 1:00. All right, the other game in that top bracket, Indian River High School, the 4 seed against Brandywine, the 5 seed. Indian River High School 7-3, Brandywine 5-5. This game I've got on the schedule as Saturday at 5:00. And folks, as we say, you always want to double check schedules before you go to the game because you never know when, for whatever reason, they might change. But on the bracket that came out, it is scheduled for Saturday at 5:00 at Indian River High School. And why 5:00? I'm not sure, but that's when it is. These teams played against each other in week 6. Brandywine won 38-28. Indian River is coming into the game on a 4-game winning streak. They've got 3 wins against tournament teams. They were including Polytech, and it was the only loss Polytech had on the season. Brandywine coming in on a 3-game losing streak. Marty, they kind of went downhill in the middle of the season. They're a team that we both thought might be able to win that district, and wasn't the case. Maybe all the travel downstate got to them in the long run because they were the one upstate team playing in that basically a downstate District 2. They have 1 win against a tournament team, and that was Indian River. And so you can lots of different ways to look at this game if you're one of those types of people. Indian River is 5-2 in the district, Brandywine 4-3 in the district, and their only out of district common opponent was Polytech. And Polytech lost to Indian River, and Brandywine lost to Polytech. And so, that's, again, if you're one of those people that likes to look at comparisons like that, all signs point to Indian River High School, it seems, but anytime you got a 4 against a 5, it could be a toss-up. You're muted.
Brandywine beat them 38-28, as you said, back on October 13th. They led that game 24-7 at halftime. It was Indian River's third loss in a row. It dropped them to 3-3, and I kind of looked at them at that point and said, "Wow, they aren't what we thought they were going to
Right.
be." And then, of course, they rebounded, and Brandywine was the one that took the tumble at the end. Back in that game, it was a big game for Krisden Wright, the quarterback for Brandywine, threw for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. All, by the way, all 231 yards, both touchdowns, all 6 completions were to wide receiver Kasir Williams. Um, this was weird. IR ran for more than 300 yards in this game, but they fumbled it 3 times in Brandywine territory. So that was the story of the game. As you said, IR and started to get hot toward the end. They won their final 4 games to finish at 7-3. Brandywine took the opposite track. It looked like they were in they were kind of getting to the danger zone at some point, depending
Mhm.
upon what was going on in other games. But Indian River does not throw a lot, which you might expect. Dylan Grice, 89 passes all season. Dylan Grice, excuse me, 89 passes all season, 629 yards, 5 touchdowns. This team rushed for 2,227 yards, which is more than twice what they gave up. So defensively, they really can be stout. Handy and Stokes have combined for over 2,100 yards themselves, the running backs. When they do throw, Stokes is the main target. He's caught 318 yards worth of catches and 5 touchdowns. They have a decent kicker. Axel Ogwin Hernandez, 27-34 on PATs. For Brandywine, Krisden Wright, it seemed like every week he was putting together a good game. Things kind of fell apart at the end there a little bit. And again, as you said, if you look at their schedule, man, they were going downstate
Mhm.
every week. I
Yep.
mean, every one of those games was on the road, it seemed like in this toward the end of the season. But he threw for 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. Running back Cameron Campbell, 600 yards. Krisden Wright ran for 600 yards as well, combined for 15 touchdowns. Kasir Williams and Anthony Drummond are their big targets on the outside. And they, of course, also have a very good kicker, a kid we mentioned before. The name I love is Ian Cleghorn. He's been nearly automatic on his PATs. I think he's missed 1 or 2. He has a 21-yard field goal. So this is, again, to me, Brandywine again seems to be in a little bit of free fall. I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I don't know about injuries or anything like that, but the confidence they're going to bring into that game from having beaten IR early in the season is going to play a part. IR just seems like they're locked in right now. They figured things out. The offense is playing well. The defense is playing really well. At their last 3 games, they gave up 7, 8, and 6 points. So they seem to be on a roll. I'd give the slight edge here to Indian River, but again, at playoff time, Brandywine had a good, strong part of the season. If they can recover some of that magic they had early on, including against Indian River, who knows?
And another long drive south.
That's right. That's right.
All right, that's the top half of the 1A bracket. Let's move to the bottom half of the 1A bracket. Number 3, Charter School of Wilmington with a 7-3 record against number 6, St. Elizabeth, Marty's alma mater, with a 5-5 record. This game is Saturday at 11 o'clock. Charter won the matchup in week 6, 18-0. They've lost 2 out of their last 3, though, Wilmington Charter has, including to McCain and Tatnall. Their one win was against AI in that stretch. They have 3 wins against tournament teams. St. Elizabeth won their final 2 games against AI and Dickinson. They've only got 1 win against a tournament team, and that's the number 8 seed Glasgow. Both of these teams are 5-2 in their district. Charter lost to McCain and Tatnall, and St. E's lost to Charter and Tatnall. So again, Marty, these were 2 tough teams during the season. St. Elizabeth wasn't nearly as good as I thought they would be, and I'm not sure if that's because they lost a lot of talent. They had a good season last season, so you kind of assume that they would be a good team this season. And they're in the playoffs, so they're a good team. But I would have not expected them to be 5-5 and a 6 seed. I would have had them at the very least a number 4 seed. And Charter of Wilmington, Tatnall kind of took the burst out of Charter of Wilmington. I think we both kind of thought Charter of Wilmington was going to run away with that district, but they didn't, and they ended up, at 7-3. And so, again, a lot of parity. We thought there was going to be a lot of parity in Class 2, which there was. I didn't think there'd be this much parity in Class 1, and maybe that's because we got kind of spoiled. It's not maybe the right term, but we got used to Laurel just dominating Class.
That's right.
1, and everybody else was an afterthought, and there wasn't really even reason to care a whole lot about it because you knew Laurel was going to win.
That's right.
Not the case this year. Laurel's up, in the other class, and so it opened it wide open. So this game, Charter and Wilmington, St. Elizabeth, going to be a toss up in my eyes.
Yeah, Cole Andrews, a freshman quarterback for St. Elizabeth, he threw for more than 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns in that game against Charter, where Charter won 18-0. They forced him into one of his worst games of the season. He was 5 of 19 for only 59 yards. They held St. E to less than 100 yards of total offense. Brady Arch scored all 3 touchdowns for Charter, 1 receiving and 2 rushing. Charter had such a weird beginning to the season too. They had the win to start the season over I can't remember who they beat in the first game, but anyway, the second game they lost 40-0 to Polytech.
Yeah.
Well, and you might say, well, how do they react to that? Well, they reacted by throwing 5 straight shutouts at their opponents. So you go from losing 40-0 to tossing 5 consecutive shutouts. As you said, they had the sort of inexplicable loss to McCain. McCain was just getting things together at the right time, and you wonder if maybe that game got overlooked a little bit. But McCain certainly earned the win. And then, yeah, the Tatnall game was just I didn't see that coming. I'm sure it's almost like I didn't see that freight train coming
Right.
if you're Charter, 52-0. And Charter or Tatnall, Charter, they've definitely got the edge going in here. As you said, the last 2 years, we kind of talked up Charter as far as, they're one of those teams that they started to have the pep rallies, the student section come in. St. E's has always had that stuff. So Charter, this looked to be the year they were going to kind of take the spotlight from everybody. Got dimmed a little bit by Tatnall. They were in their shadow throughout the season. Then, of course, they took it on the chin from Tatnall. But I still think this is a strong Charter team. They're driven by defense, 6 shutouts on the season, including 5 in a row. Their offense, they had such a bizarre line here. Their offense averaged only 15 points per game, which is 8 points less than the next lowest playoff team in the field. So it's kind of crazy. You don't often see a lot of playoff teams that average, and by the way, a 3 seed averaging 15 points a game, which just goes to show how good their defense is. Roman Paoli, their quarterback, he's been around for a few years, 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. John Foley and Brady Arch combined for 1,000 rush yards and 6 TD. Juan Aldis and Arch combined for nearly 1,000 receiving yards. And by the way, anybody who hears this, if you see Brady, it looks like it's Herrick. And I want to give a shout out to the Charter coach, Winnington, for actually putting in pronunciations of the guys who had last names that were tough. I really, as guys who do this, we really appreciate that. I wouldn't have come up with Arch in a million years for the way this is spelled. So thank you so much to Coach Winnington for doing that, and for Brady so that we get it correct. Defensively, Juan Aldis, 135 tackles. He was the district defensive player of the year. Their punter, Andrew Lober. I like to highlight the kickers. He's the first team punter all district. He averaged 40 yards a kick at 6 punts inside opponent's 5-yard line. For St. E, Cole Andrews, if he's hot, he's good. As I said, over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. Jihad Brown ran for nearly 900 yards and 12 touchdowns. Gavin Andrews, who is the senior brother of Cole Andrews, ran for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Defensively, they're led by Chase Milnes and Ryan McCormick. Lucas Rayburn was the sack leader of the team. The one thing that's going to hurt St. Elizabeth, they converted one point after touchdown this season in terms of a kick. So they're, and it's not like a Smyrna situation, I don't think. So they've actually tried a few. And so that could be tough. In the game where it was Charter 18-0, of course, there was no 2-point conversions or extra points in that game for whatever reason. But I give Charter the edge here. I really thought that St. Elizabeth's was going to step up because of Laurel moving up. What I didn't see, and Mike Levin kind of warned us about in the preseason, was that we lost a ton of guys and we're replacing them. And again, you have a freshman quarterback. And it's been a slog for St. Elizabeth this season. They're having to really fight and claw for everything. As you said, they managed to get in, and at this point, who knows? We've seen them do some pretty good things on the field. Again, Charter averaging 15 points per game, which tells you their defense has to be really strong. Because they really can't rely on the offense to get it done for them. So this could be a sneakily good matchup. Whereas a 3-6 usually say, there might be something. This is going to be a good game.
Well, and of course, is that charter school in Wilmington, which is a grass field, and there is
Yes.
rain due in the area overnight. And so it'll be interesting to see if that, no grass field is in great shape at this time of the year, no matter how
No.
good the people take care of it. But it'll be interesting to see if that plays a part in it as well. All right, bottom of the bracket, last game, number 2 Polytech against number 7 Glasgow. Polytech at 9-1. Glasgow at 4-6. This game is going to be Friday at 7:00. It's the first ever playoff appearance for Polytech, and therefore the first ever playoff game that they've hosted. I was actually at a luncheon, Marty, with a couple of their teachers, the superintendent down there, and they are excited as all get out, as you can imagine, to host this team. The teams haven't played since 2008 against each other,
Wow.
so a long time ago. So you might as well say they haven't played each other. Polytech's only loss, as we just mentioned, was to Indian River way back in week 3. They've got 4 wins against tournament teams, so you can say they're tournament tested. Glasgow has 0 wins against tournament teams, kind of snuck into the tournament with a 4-game winning streak to end the season. Their wins are against teams that have a combined 8 wins. And so, again, no disrespect to Glasgow. You did what you had to do.
Yep.
You got in the tournament, but they barely got into the tournament. I believe it was St. Andrews, who was like a half a point or something like that away from getting in. But they're in, and that's all that matters. And they've got nothing to play for except to try to win a playoff game and get to the next weekend. And so it's going to be it'll be interesting. You got a first-time team in the playoffs playing at home, and a Glasgow team, a program that has a lot more playoff experience. Of course, any playoff experience would be more than Polytech, but Glasgow has a lot more playoff experience than a lot of people think. It's just not this group of kids and this group of coaches that has that playoff experience. Yep. Glasgow made a lot of playoffs over the years, but not this program itself that is going to be heading to Polytech.
Well, 2 things here. Polytech's averaging 30 points a game, which is going to present some problems from Glasgow. But Polytech, in the case of it is a close game. They've got experience there. During weeks 7 through 9, they beat Conrad, Seaford, and Brandywine. They won those 3 games by a combined 10 points. So they're able to get over the hump in the close games as well. They're one of the most balanced teams in the entire playoff field. They passed for 1,400 yards. They ran for 1,500. Quarterback Isaac Balserac, 62%, 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns. Also ran for about 300 yards. Noah Walker is a big weapon for them, for Polytech, 1,200 yards, 18 touchdowns. Wide receiver Jalen Anderson, 500 plus receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Simon Balserac, who I believe the Balseracs are twins. Simon Balserac and Jalen Anderson each had 3 interceptions. Polytech, as you said, after that loss to Indian River in week 3, they just really turned it on. First State Military, who again was starting to look pretty good then, they beat them 35-6, and it just kind of rolled from there. But as I said, they won those 3 close games, which to me is probably just as important as the fact that they won 9 games at all, is getting that experience in the close games. And it's something Polytech in their history never really has had to do, because they weren't really worried about a playoff spot that late in the season. So right. They were already out of it by then. Glasgow is so bizarre with realignment, 0-6. You don't usually control your destiny, and people look at the schedule and say, you know what? They could go 4-6 and sneak into the playoffs. So you're telling me there's a chance. And to your point, they did it. There's nothing. They got nothing to apologize for with that record. No matter who they played, you still got to go out and win those games.
Yep.
The one thing I love hearing is the coach sent us an email, and kids never gave up, continued to work hard, understanding the season was not over even at 0-6.
Yeah.
I always love these kinds of stories because, and this is Coach Ricky Brown, by the way, a first-round coach that covering that area.
Yep.
But I love the fact that at 0-6, let's face it, 0-4, you could write it off and say, oh God, we're not going to win anything. And
seniors aren't coming to practice anymore.
Yeah, half-butted during practice throughout the week and stuff like that. And they didn't let that happen. And he even said, he said that we drove the kids and they responded. He credits the defense to the success in those last 4 games. In the last 5 games combined, they gave up only 28 total points. They won 4 straight with 2 shutouts. He singled out Cameron Swinney, Ish Lane, Demir Bean, and Colin Moorhead on the defensive side. Offensively, they've got 2 running backs, Jamar Smith and Walter Best. They've combined for about 800 yards and 7 touchdowns. On defense, Cameron Swinney, 95 total tackles, 19 tackles for loss, and 12 sacks. He's going to have to be a guy that Polytech will contend with on the line. Again, much in the same way as the First State Military game, this seems to me like a program builder for Glasgow. Ricky Brown, he takes over, he gets in the playoffs his first season. And again, 0-6, you win those last 4 games. That's an accomplishment. Again, nothing to apologize there for. So while I think that Polytech is a huge, overwhelming favorite here, again, weather-wise, you just don't know what's going to happen, and it could be an interesting game for these kids for Glasgow to get experience, because as we always say, these blue blood programs and other classes and stuff like that, these kids are gone in 4 years. These programs got to keep going, and this is just a great start for Ricky Brown to his tenure at Glasgow. So congratulations to him and his staff on getting in, and of course to Dave Eilers and on his kids at Polytech, going 9-1 after never having made the playoffs. Tremendous accomplishment.
And Marty, I'm going to say, to wrap this up for Class 1, of the 3 classes, this is the one class that I feel the number 1 and the number 2 seeds are the 2 best teams in the class, and it will be a shame if they don't make it to the championship game. And now the other 6 teams can all use that as bulletin board material. Feel free. Just make sure you mention the pod when you do say it. But I do think that I'll be kind of disappointed if it's not Tatnall versus Polytech in a championship game. Doesn't mean it won't be a great game if it's not. Doesn't mean any of that. But when I look at Class 3 and when we look at Class 2, there's a few matchups that I wouldn't mind seeing in the championship game.
Right.
In Class 1, the matchup I want to see is Tatnall against Polytech.
Well, just real quick, and you look at the 3 seed to drive your point home even more. Charter lost to Tatnall 52-0. They lost to Polytech 40-0.
Right.
So there is a definite line drawn there between the 2 and the 3 seeds. Yeah. So I agree, it would be a great championship to see Tatnall and Polytech in the final.
All right, that wraps up our discussion and our look at the Class 1A bracket. If you're interested in the Class 3 or the Class 2, they're going to drop as separate podcasts, so you can certainly check them out. We want to thank our sponsors, Grain Restaurant, Marticelli Restaurant Group, Diamond Hill Incorporated, Mary Kate Johnson with Remac Associates, and Dan Rigby, author of the Win the Day Planner. And, of course, our presenting sponsors, websitesforsports.com. That's websites, the number 4 sports.com. We appreciate them as the presenting sponsor of the podcast. All right. It's playoff time, folks. We can't wait, and we know you can't either. For Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.